Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Blues Feed for a very special transfer-related episode today. Danny and I have the wonderful Rob Pratley with us. Rob, how are you, my friend?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. I'm enjoying the fact that England have made it through to the next round of the World Cup, which looked unlikely at times.
Yes, somehow we got through. That was actually going to be my first question for you both, and I don't want to take up too much time of the pod. But Danny, how bad did you find that last night, and how positive are you going into Mexico?
It reminded me of watching Chelsea last year, where we had a million chances but couldn't score, and some terrible players on the pitch. That's what it reminded me of. Mexico's going to be tough. I thought it was always going to be tough. I mean, they haven't lost at home for like 9 years or something stupid like that.
2013, and they last lost in the Azteca.
Was it 13 years then? At altitude as well, which is not ideal. But we'll have to see what happens. At certain points, I didn't think I was going to have to stay up till 1 a.m. to watch it. So now I have to work it out.
That was the one positive that was coming out of the game when we were losing was no Monday 1 a.m. Rob,
but I'd also say, just to finish there, I never thought I would sit there and wish that Malo Gusto was our right back up to Reece James ever in my life. But last night we found out that Jed Spence is worse than Malo Gusto. So,
Rob, how are you feeling going into Mexico?
I mean, it'll be a difficult game. I do think the fact that, England at the moment probably have the second best, if not the best striker in the world, does help. It was again similar to when you said about the Chelsea games last year. Unlike, last year at times where perhaps we didn't necessarily have their first up there. England thankfully had Harry Kane up there. But, it's the sort of thing, I think if we could then beat Mexico, it would be a massive, confidence boost on a lot of levels.
It's a huge statement, isn't it? If we go there and win, I think they've only ever lost 2 games at the Azteca. Home crowd in a World Cup, the atmosphere is going to be insane. I think the positives for England is there's going to be a lot of transitions going forward. They're going to want to be aggressive. They're not going to sit back. They're not going to low block. So it should be an interesting one. I just wish it wasn't 1 a.m. on a Monday. But anyway, we're here to talk Chelsea. We're going to talk all things transfers at the minute. Rob, I think we'll start with outgoings, and then we'll come on to some of the rumours around incoming. So, the first one that I wanted to ask your opinion about was Trevor Chalobah. A, on your standpoint on it, and then B, where you think he'll end up, whether it'll be Como or Inter.
I think it's interesting. I think with Chalobah, there was interest in the player from other clubs historically, but I do think now probably is the right time for all parties to sort of look to find something different. He wants to be a regular starter, and I don't think he's going to get that at Chelsea next season. Chelsea, as we know, are looking to bring in defenders and bring in options. And I do think that, Como obviously really, really keen. They've obviously made an offer so far. It's well below the valuation. Inter, I do think, are panicking a little bit. Because of the fact they can get Palestra and they missed out on some other targets. They maybe aren't going to get Uma Salayan. So it's sort of a situation where I could see them definitely coming in for the play. But he definitely wants to go and play in Italy. So I do think if the right bid comes in, then the club will be inclined to accept it.
I think Italy generally, but Como specifically, would be a great move for Trev. I think he'd really, really flourish out there. Danny, we spoke about Trev on Monday earlier this week. I wanted to talk to you about Malo Gusto quickly, and then get onto Rob's opinion on it. Obviously, you mentioned how your opinions are on Gusto at the start of the show with comparing him to Jed Spence, or he's better than Jed Spence. Where do you think he ends up? Because I just don't know if I see City paying nearer to the valuation in terms of a package, considering the outlay that they've just put down for Anderson, as well as now they're linked with Camavinga as well. What do you think? Because I think Gusto will go. It's just where he ends up.
I still expect him to go to City. I just think at the moment there's just transfer fee games going on in the media. I also expect that that Maresca wants his Xhaka, his KDH that he had at Chelsea when he first joined, and his Xhaka that Alonso wants. He wants someone there to be his champion that he's actually worked with from a manager's perspective. So they also need a right back. There's also no particularly good right backs out there. So yeah, I expect him to go to City. I just think there's a bit of back and forth in the media about valuation.
Rob, where are you at on this one?
I think Gusto will probably leave this summer. I'm not sure exactly where to in the end, in all honesty, because there is interest from elsewhere. There's interest from the likes of Paris Saint-Germain. There's interest from Bayern Munich. I think he's decided he wants to go. So it's a difficult one. I could see the cash going down, and see the money going down, and I could see a compromise being found, in all honesty, after the World Cup. I think everyone will probably come together and agree it's probably the right thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is time for him to go. Yeah, he showed some good moments in Poch's season, a little bit under Maresca, but definitely the last year or so he's been way below the standard he'd originally set himself. A couple of sort of more fringe players I wanted to ask about, and I'll ask about them in bulk, because we saw a report yesterday that Palace have got interest in a couple of Chelsea players, which we already knew, and we've spoken about it on here before. But Chelsea specifically have offered them a load of centre-back options. Axel Disasi is one that I think Danny's definitely heard it. Rob, I don't know if you've heard the same, that Palace are interested in Disasi. But where do you see one of our centre-backs going to Palace? And if so, which one? Because there was talks about Chalobah. We know that he wants to go to Italy. Disasi, Badiashile, and then they've also got the option of somebody like a Mamadou Sarr or even potentially a Josh Achimpong on loan.
Yeah, I think the issue is, and like from something someone said to me, is that Palace don't really want to take, say, Achimpong or Sarr on loan and then just develop them for a year and not the chance to buy them. If they took someone on loan, I think they'd want an option to buy, because they don't want to feel like they're just effectively developing our players for us. They obviously did that a few years ago with Loftus-Cheek and Gallagher, and then when they thought they were going to get a chance to buy them, well, in Loftus-Cheek's case, he turned down the move, and in Gallagher's case, they couldn't get anywhere near the valuation that was requested. So I do think that there's probably a chance of them going for one of the centre-backs. Disasi, I think, probably makes the most logical sense, because he's, based in London. He's very happy in London. He's obviously had a decent loan spell. Pierre Sarr, I might know him from his time in France as well. But I do think that I'd say at the minute it's unlikely for the two of them to be directly linked. I could see them maybe going in for a Disasi, but they have other targets as well. And I don't think that there's necessarily a correlation, between Chelsea getting Maxence Lacroix and one of their centre-backs going to Crystal Palace.
No, it just, I suppose there's not a huge centre-back pool this summer. So they're generally, because of the amount of centre-backs we have on the roster, they're going to be linked with one or two of them at some point, I suppose. And it's easy journalism for people to link them with Chelsea players, given the ongoing Maxence Lacroix negotiations. The other outgoing I want to talk about before we move on to incomings is the saga of the summer, the one that seems like it's going to rumble on for a while, Enzo Fernandez. I mean, the way we understand it, I don't know if it's the same as you, Rob, but to us, it's very much that Enzo has close enough agreed personal terms with Madrid. They're not going to be an issue, basically. But then also you've got the fact that Chelsea and Madrid have had conversations about it. Obviously, in negotiations for Marc Cucurella, there's been more recent correspondence between the two clubs, maybe via agents. Where do you understand this one to be, and do you reckon it ends up getting done?
Yeah, I mean, I think from Chelsea's point of view, they've set a valuation on Enzo Fernandez, and basically they're inviting teams just to meet the valuation. And then when similar with Marc Cucurella, they had a valuation set, and they said, when a team meets the valuation, you can go. I think they're saying the same for Enzo Fernandez. I think the issue for Enzo Fernandez is that the real team that he's most interested in Real Madrid aren't necessarily interested in that valuation. Now, obviously, this could cause a problem, but I do think Chelsea will be happy just to sit it out and wait till certainly after the World Cup has finished, and we'll be happy to let it sort of rumble on a little bit. Obviously, I do think probably he will end up leaving this summer, but I don't think Chelsea will be inclined to selling on the cheap. And I think the fact that you've seen such fees paid for the likes of Sandro Tonali going to Stockton for 100 million, Elliot Anderson go for 115 million, Matheus Fernandes going for 95 million. The numbers that are being quoted and stuff, you can't see Chelsea selling Enzo Fernandez, a World Cup winner and a very, very good midfielder, for any less than that, considering the contract situation. And I could well see a situation, despite what Javier Pastore is saying at the minute, where it gets to the end of the World Cup and no formalised bidders come in for him. And I do think it's interesting. You did say, yeah, we'll talk to Chelsea again after the World Cup. I do wonder if there might be an attempt on that side to try and get a deal and thrash out a deal done and see how much maybe Xabi Alonso wants him.
Yeah, it's sort of it's a really tricky situation to be in the middle of, and I think Chelsea are in the middle here. The player clearly wants Madrid. Madrid want the player, just not the value that Chelsea put him on. But the market is the market. Elliot Anderson goes for 116 million. Matheus Fernandes goes for 85 million. Enzo Fernandez is better than both of those players.
And hardly for 100 as well.
Exactly. So
it's good. The thing is it's going to have to be, regardless of whatever the fee is, it's going to have to be over 100 million. If it's quite as high as 120, whatever. But that's the going rate for good midfielders. So the one thing I would say, from what I understand, Real Madrid need to sell some players before they add anybody else in. They've got Tchouaméni, they've got Camavinga, they've got 400 centre backs now because they keep signing them. They need to sell a few before they buy. So I expect that's why nothing is really moving. Once they sell a couple of midfielders, I think they'll re-establish it.
I mean, the real wild card, and I did mention this to someone else's one, the real wild card I heard is that they are quite keen, and certainly Jose is quite keen on the idea of Declan Rice and quite likes the idea of Rice coming to Real Madrid. And I don't necessarily think Arsenal would sell, or indeed Rice would necessarily want to go. But I do think it is interesting, very much Enzo isn't the cut and shut name. For example, like Marc Cucurella, we've heard, this was Jose's choice. Jose wanted him. They went and got him. Canate, again, Jose's choice, went and got, wanted him, went and got him. Selling Nico Paz to Como, Jose's choice. Jose said he didn't see a future for him, went and sold him. And this case with Enzo, we've heard, some people have said, oh, yeah, it's Jose's decision and Jose wants him. And other people have been very, very sort of offered very, very different perspectives to that.
Yeah, I think whatever happens after this summer, I think Enzo Fernandez needs to sack his agent, even if he gets the move to Madrid. What a penis that guy is. Jesus Christ. I think this one's going to rumble on. I would expect that once Argentina are out of the World Cup, or if the World Cup is over, whichever comes first, that maybe we will start to see a little bit stronger movement on it. And then you'll know for sure, I think, within weeks of the World Cup or Argentina's World Cup finishing, whether he's going to be a Real Madrid player or not come the start of September. Let's move on to what all the people here actually really care about, which is incomings. So let's talk Pep Chavaria. Danny and I spoke about him on our pod earlier in the week. Rob, what's your opinion on the player? I'm assuming you're similar to the rest of us, hadn't really heard of him before and have subsequently done research and read up on him. Yeah, I mean, I spoke to Rory, and I said to Rory, on it that he sort of has watched a lot of the player, Rory Barlow, and he sort of said to me, I sort of said, what do you think of this? And he sort of said to me, well, he's a good player, he's very tenacious, he's the sort of player that people might like, but at the same time, it's not necessarily someone that is, what's the phrase for it? It's not necessarily something that is, the sort of player you'd expect to be signed by Chelsea. That said, it does sound he's very much a Xabi Alonso pick, and very much someone who Alonso thinks can play that left-back role, play that left wing-back role, and also I think most importantly is considered to be more affordable than some of the other targets, and considered to also not block other pathways. Because that I know has been a big debate this season, a big issue for Chelsea, has been showing pathways and presenting pathways to younger players. I do think it will probably end up happening, despite the fact that the sort of reports there in the Spanish press about reporting Chelsea to FIFA, that just seemed to be a lot of hot air in all honesty. But I do think it probably will end up happening. I'm not necessarily sure how much it'll end up being for. I don't think it'll necessarily be the most expensive deal. I could see something maybe around 17 to 18 million euros and then some add-ons with it.
But I do think that, it's very much a case that Chelsea obviously gone away and scouted the player and found someone that, Alonso likes, or found someone in Alonso's mould. Because the other names on the list were the likes of Gabriel Gudmundsson, who I think is going to be too expensive. From what I understand, Leeds are very much pricing him out of the market. Maxi Arujo, in a similar situation, Sporting Club de Portugal, want his release clause paid in full. I heard Anthony Robinson mention to it, but again, Fulham want a lot of money for the player, and having already lost Harry Wilson this summer, they're determined to sort of not be in a situation where Alvaro Arbeloa is effectively losing all of his star players in one summer. So I think it will probably end up happening. I'm just not sure it'll necessarily have the sort of necessarily be this week. I think it will happen though.
Who would your first choice for that sort of hybrid left centre back, left wing back have been? I
mean, are we talking besides the obvious answer here? Because the obvious answer with this is the situation again. You talk about pathways. Is the club should have shown Lewis Hall a better pathway a few years ago. Mauricio Pochettino making it very clear that he was the third choice, left back and eighth choice midfielder was completely bonkers and should never have been allowed to happen. So I do think that's the obvious answer. But let's face it, Hall this window is Newcastle are going to ask an extraordinary amount of money for him, considering his age, considering the fact I think he's got 2 years left on his deal still at the minute, considering the fact that fullbacks are going at a premium in this market because there's so few of them. I think you'd probably be looking at a world record fee for a fullback to sign Lewis Hall this window. And I simply don't think Chelsea have the inclination to sort of do that. I also do think it's interesting that Chelsea, plumped on, they put 47 million on Palestra. As someone did say to me, Palestra can play both sides and can play both sides very well. So I do think they may be looking at someone in Chavaria that's, happy to be a cover, happy to be a rotation player, and isn't going to kick the fuss if they're not playing. In terms of my absolute first choice, like left back solution, if money wasn't an option for a wing back, and I do think this is I'd put it Alejandro Balde at Barcelona, because I think he's probably the fullback I look at and think, you've got the best attributes to be a world class wing back for the next 5 or so years, 5 to 10 years of his age. But it simply wasn't going to happen. And when he was raised in conversations with João Pedro, it was a case they almost wanted a straight swap for João Pedro, which is how highly they value Balde at.
Jeez. Danny, I don't know if I ever asked you that question, actually. And if I did, then my memory is terrible. Who would your choice for that area of the pitch been, from a realistic standpoint, in terms of it looks like we're going for more of a rotation option?
A realistic standpoint would have been someone like, he's more left back, left wing back, but like an Antonio Robinson, I think would have been a very good choice for that type of role. Premier League proven, done it for a few years. That would have been probably my choice for that. I mean,
I can tell you for a fact.
Go on.
I can tell you for a fact on Robinson that when a club did inquire earlier this summer, they were quoted 50 million.
Fair.
I could just tell you that for when a club did inquire, because the thing is, there's such a dearth of fullbacks in the world. Robinson is viewed very, very highly. In it, but at the same time, Fulham, as I said, are desperate not to be seen to just have been picked off. And I think 2 years left on his deal again. I think they don't have, or biggest deal is 2028. They have no inclination to sell cheaply. I think one thing people will find as a general point this summer is that Premier League clubs, unless they're players that they want to get rid of, you're going to see a lot of players priced at very silly values, because clubs simply know that other Premier League clubs trying to buy them are are cash rich, and so they're going to always have to pay a penalty fee for the fact that it's another Premier League club.
That's 50 mil is crazy for Robinson. Like, he's a good player, a really good player. What do you think when Nathaniel Brown's going to Bayern Munich for that amount of money? It's in comparison, it's crazy. I just want to quickly cut for 1 second. Just from an England perspective, David Ornstein's just put out that Reece James has commented saying it's okay, I'm feeling good, when he was in the mix zone after the game yesterday, and he's aiming to be available for Sunday's match against Mexico. So that's positive news. It always seemed like it was more cautious than anything with Reece, which is the best way to treat him, I suppose.
Yeah, no, agreed.
Hope so, because I can't watch Jed Spence at 1 a.m.
I'm actually in the boat of, if Reece isn't available, let's just play Declan Rice there, and that's sort of crazy.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, back to Chelsea, back to transfers. Let's talk Maxence Lacroix before we move on to Granit Xhaka. So with Lacroix, Rob, the way we've understood it and reported it here, it is that it's very far down the line. Palace are refusing to say that or admit that to people when asked a question. They want a replacement in. They don't want to be left in a position where they're paying a premium for a replacement, which is understandable. And it's just one of them things that just a little bit of calm and just a little bit of patience will work the best here.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I also think it's important to note that, like, every report, now, this is why I'm a bit confused about some people's responses to it, is that every report on Lacroix that happened before the tournament and after the, during the World Cup has been very much a case of that it'll be dealt with after the World Cup. So I'm not really sure why people are surprised while France are still in the World Cup that they're saying there's no contact. I don't really get why people are so surprised at it. They have no interest, from what I understand, in negotiating, in any decent terms while the World Cup is on. I think very much it's a case that Chelsea want to get this to a stage where they can make one offer, Palace can have a replacement ready, and it can be a case of, right, get X in through the door and get Y out through the door. And, we know their main replacement is Charlie Cresswell. I know they've had conversations with Toulouse over the player because he was also on the list for Strasbourg this summer, and someone that Strasbourg do like. Certainly when Gary O'Neill was there, he was, probably, I'd say, becoming a prime target, for want of a better phrase. But I do think that, it's sort of quite clear to me that this one is one where people just need to be patient. They just need to sit tight and wait.
Realistically as well, like you say, with France being in the World Cup, so unless something crazy happens, they're going to be in the final, or at least in the very late stages of this competition. So it's one of those things that there will be no updates. There will be patience required for the next week or two until the World Cup reaches its climax. So
yeah, and I think it's fair. I think it's fair to note, and I said this before. Look very carefully when the story came out beforehand about Lacroix moving to Chelsea for, I think they said 52 million euros plus bonuses. Look where that originated from. Look at that publication, and then look who were the first to announce Lacroix's move, both to Wolfsburg in the first place and his first move to Crystal Palace, and you will then understand where that Lacroix story actually originated from.
Yeah, I would just say to anybody who is getting nervous on that transfer, just a bit of patience, a bit of calm. It's pretty likely to happen. Danny, do you want
I have zero doubt that Maxime Lacroix will be a Chelsea player. That's how confident.
That he won't be a Chelsea player. You have zero doubt.
Yeah, I have zero doubt that he won't be. I have zero worry about it at all.
Yeah. There you go. There's the Danny Windsor sign of a seal of approval for you all. Danny.
There we land.
No, you need a better one. That one's been done. You need a better catchphrase.
Yeah. I'll think of one.
Yeah, have a think. See if we can get you one. And then the last one that I'm going to ask you about, Rob, before we come to a couple of quick questions, and then see if you've got anything you want to reveal or X, Y, and Z, is Granit Xhaka. Another one that we do expect it to get done, but purely through the pushing of Xhaka. I think personally, the next bid made, the rumours are sort of 12 mil-ish. I think that's going to be made for Sunderland to reject it and Xhaka to go, right, come on, guys, I'm going. Here's my transfer request. Please let me leave. Rob, where do you sit on this?
Yeah, broadly similar. That's what I've heard and what I've understood is that Xhaka's asked politely, come to them once, and also said more firmly after this first bid, please accept the next bid. I want to go. I think that if this next one's rejected, I think that'll be the point to push it. I do think probably Chelsea. Interesting, someone said to me the 8 million offer would have put them below SCR. I think the current offer puts them into a very slight profit with squad cost ratio for Sunderland, and I do think that's quite interesting. The only concern I suppose I might have at this stage is that I do think Sunderland don't want to appear weak in the market publicly because obviously they've seen their northeast neighbours being picked clean for bones this summer. And I do think Sunderland will, they will want to have a strong public front and make it look like, Xhaka forced this, we couldn't do anything about it. That said, I do think this will end up happening because just from a pure logic POV, I can't see them wanting to keep a player who is ultimately going to be unhappy and ultimately does want to go. They know they want to go, especially with the fact they're club captain. It's a very, very difficult situation to be in because effectively you've just undermined the whole dressing room.
Yeah, exactly that. Danny, have you got anything to add to the Xhaka storyline?
I mean, Arsenal didn't want to sell him. They sold him. Bayer Leverkusen didn't want to sell him. They sold him. Xhaka makes it pretty hard for clubs to keep him when they don't want him. I expect
it's hard to keep any player that doesn't want to stay, isn't it? There's almost no point in it as long as you're gaining financially from it, I suppose.
I mean, I think we'll end up paying about 15 million, which will actually give them a little bit of a profit because they probably haven't triggered any of the add-ons in his contract.
Actually, I do know they have triggered one of the add-ons because one of the add-ons was the right European qualification.
So fine, they'll break even, if not profit, on him at 15 million.
Sunderland must have put that in and gone, oh yeah, like let's add an add-on for just in case we qualify for Europe, thinking like we're going to be down like the bottom echelons of the table.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Like again, and I've said this to someone, and again, I don't know if you'll listen to this, but one of my friends who's a very good Sunderland source on this did say to me that at the start of last season he didn't have any, he had no worries about them being involved in a relegation scrap. And I looked at them and said, it's interesting. There's a lot of recruitment here that's been done very, very well. And one thing someone has really stressed to me, and I do think this is true, is that Sunderland have already recruited in advance of knowing if any of their players left, they have replacements in mind and have people ready to come in and step into the breach for every single position. And I don't doubt that's true, knowing the way Kiro Louis-Dreyfus works and knowing the way that they recruit and the way they scout.
It sounds very similar to like a Brighton, Brentford, Bournemouth type model, I suppose. So that generally does tend to work for those sort of mid to lower range Prem teams. So hopefully that's true. I like Sunderland. They're a big club and obviously I want to see this deal get done and I hope they get what they want out of it. Robert, we had a load of questions on Twitter for you. We've covered a lot of them. I'm going to just a couple of quick fire ones and then we'll start wrapping up. So let's start with, do you think we will end up signing 2 centre-backs?
Yes, if 3 or 4 leave. Like it requires outgoings to happen, but if you assume that at least, I think one needs to go in order to facilitate one coming in, but then at least 2 more need to go. I think if you start losing the likes of, let's say, any 2 of Dizazi, Tosin, Badiashile, or even Mamadou Sarr or Josh Akinpong, then another one arrives.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's where the Jacob Ramon stuff comes from.
Yeah.
That if we do sell 3 or 4, we sign someone like him, which doesn't necessarily have to start every week. But I actually don't expect us to sign another centre back because I think we'll probably end up with Fofana, Lacroix, Colwell, and maybe one more Josh plus Hatto as well. So I don't actually expect
my thought has always been that for us to get 2, Fofana has to go. If they manage to get rid of, because I don't think they'll struggle to get rid of any of the others that much, or they might have to take a slight price drop, etc. But I think if they manage to get rid of Wesley Fofana, I think that's always been my opinion, is that we'll end up with 2. But
I don't think we'll be able to get rid of Fofana. I don't actually think the club want to sell Fofana that much. I think they just want to get him on a new contract with incentivized wages. If they could do that, they'd do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard different stuff on Fofana, but I think it's for another time. So.
Okie dokes. The attacking area of the pitch is interesting. Obviously, we all know we're still there for Rodgers. Rodgers prefers Arsenal. Villa have lumped the price tag on him. It looks like a bit of a media war between Arsenal and Villa, to be honest. We're just waiting to pick up the pieces if it gets to that. So, Rob, where do you see that sort of attacking signing? Who do you see that being, or have you got any preferences on who you'd like it to be? I know Danny and I have slightly disagreed on who we would both like. I think I've decided that I'd like Kroupi. I think he'd be fantastic off the left. He can also play as a 9 and as a 10. Or obviously, if Bradley Barcola was available and we could get him, then he would be fantastic. I love Morgan Rogers as a footballer. I'm just not convinced on him from the left. I prefer him in the 10, and we don't really need a 10. So where do you sit that sort of left wing scenario?
I mean, I do really like Eli Kroupi Jr. I do think that he is a very good player, but I do think there will be, like, if he comes to market, I think there'll be an awful lot of interest, and I also think his agent will be cautious to remind him that in the future they want, the aim was to get the roof to PSG or Real Madrid, so they will want something in contracts anyway, allowing them to do that in the future. Barcola, I'm not so convinced PSG are as willing sellers as some people let on. Certainly not at the price tag people are suggesting. When I spoke to a good friend in Paris, they said Barcola's settled. Barcola doesn't really want to leave. It would only be a case if he got pushed out. But by PSG, they don't seem wanting to do that, and they slapped £135 million price tag on him, seeing what is being quoted for Diamande, because they've said, look, well, we think Barcola's a better player. I do like Iliman and Dye, but I do think he will probably get priced out this summer. It'll be interesting because Everton do have interest in some Chelsea players, but I'm not necessarily sure something can be done there at this moment in time. It's sort of a weird one, really, the left attacking or the sort of left wing role, because there's a lot of names in there that ultimately Chelsea, I don't think will either be at the table A, due to no Champions League football, or B, due to the fact that the player will simply get priced out, or a combination of both. I'd quite like them to, look a bit further afield. I think there's some really interesting, options in other leagues. There are some interesting sort of names that, do come to mind. I'm just trying to think of a couple of them that I thought actually they could be sort of good signings. Let me find my notes.
Well, that was
while you're doing that, I would have Junior Kroupi in a fucking heartbeat. He's an absolute baller.
It's like so. Obviously, there was some rogue links with Spurs last night, which I don't expect to come to fruition at all. Because
let Spurs think they're getting him, and we'll just come big daddy them.
Well, the thing is, like Rob says, once he comes to the market, everybody and their dog is going to be interested in him. So realistically, he's not going to pick Spurs. The only reason Tonali's gone to Spurs is because he had no other options.
Yeah, I saw someone try and claim that he turned down Man City to go to Tottenham, and I just
of course he did.
I actually think the race for Kroupi will probably be next year, unless he actually comes to the market and they push for this summer. I think that he's more likely to do as Semenyo and re-sign and insert a clause. So next summer, 470 million, for example, which is probably slightly under market value by that point, he can go. I think that's more likely. But if he comes to the market, I'm there.
I mean, I do like Mika. I do like Mika Gertz at Ajax, but again, I'm not sure if Ajax are pricing him out the market. I know there's been various sort of actions for various teams of pricing players sort of out, and this is the big issue: is that a lot of Prem teams are finding themselves facing different price tags for players compared to if it's other clubs going after it. I mean, with Inter Milan for Palestra, it was a much cheaper fee, and then Chelsea came in, and then suddenly 10 million got added to it. Chelsea did just say, yeah, that's still fine, we're happy to pay that. You could maybe, as a bit of a wild card for someone who's a consistent goal scorer, I know he's played more further forward in recent years, and again, I'm not necessarily sure at the moment on his fitness levels, but someone like Serge Gnabry at Bayern Munich, I think Bayern would be happy to let him go, seeing as his age, he can play a variety of roles. He would qualify, I think, as homegrown due to his time at Arsenal. And it's sort of a strange situation where he didn't play a lot last season, as much as I think he'd like, but he still ended the season with double figures in goals and assists. So, I think if you threw money at Bayern Munich, knowing how Bayern operate, they would consider it instead about persuading the player.
Fair enough. So, one interesting thing that people keep commenting, and I'm assuming they mean this from a financial standpoint, is are we expected to make a statement signing this summer? And by statement, I'm assuming spend a load of money on one person. Because for me, a statement would be signing Granit Xhaka, somebody that Xabi Alonso's requested, signing Maxence Lacroix, a Premier League proven centre back who ticks all the boxes. So,
I mean,
from their position is a financial standpoint. Do you expect us to say, let's say, 60 million plus on somebody that's a statement signing this summer? Do you see that occurring?
Without sales happening, no. I think if sales happen and the right player becomes available, yes. I think the main issue I have, and this is similar to the old joke of what do you call what's a marquee signing? It's buying a load of tents. It's the old joke of that I don't like the term statement signing because again, in a similar way to what you just said, I think that marketing someone as a statement signing is a dangerous thing to do. Like Wirtz last year was meant to be a statement signing for Liverpool, and in reality, ended up with numbers that were very below par. Isak's statement signing for Liverpool and spent most of the year, on the treatment table. Whereas, say, for Sunderland, no one was calling Omar Alderete a statement signing, and yet he was one of the main reasons they ended up, finishing as high as they did. People were calling, weren't necessarily saying for Arsenal last summer when you looked at them that at the end of the year you'd probably look at Mosquera as their most successful one of the signings, all things considered. So, I honestly, I don't think we will throw money at it for the sake of throwing money at it. Like, I know there's an awful lot of nonsense about finances and stuff like that, and a lot about, club finance and what they can and can't do. The club do have the money available and do have the ability to do it. And from a score cost ratio and from an FFP point of view, they could do it. But I think they're more interested in finding the right players and getting the right solutions rather than just throwing money at something, this is probably the first window where that's been the case.
Yeah. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so Rob, before we wrap it up then, have you got any names you want to drop? Anybody you want to mention that you think maybe there's names that haven't been mentioned as much or at all in the media that you wanted to say there's interest in? Anything like that for the people?
I'm trying to think if there's anything I can say at the minute.
Something you're not allowed to say, but
I'm trying to think at the minute. I mean, a lot of it at this minute in time, like as someone said, a lot of it is very hard to actually get information out from the club, apart from when deals do happen. Now, one thing I will say is that I would ignore. Yes, we heard the nonsense that they were saying Palestra was one of these ready-made signings. I would ignore that, that stance. To be honest, I spoke to someone after that and said it to another journalist afterwards, and they just said, they're just saying that now in order to cover the backs of cover their backs and make it very easy to say, look, we've exceeded the number 2 when they sign someone else in that role. I do think, one thing I would say, maybe an interesting sort of one to look at, I would keep an eye on Pedro Neto's future after the World Cup, because Neto certainly, in his mind, feels like he should be playing Champions League football this year. I don't necessarily think there's an obvious starting role for him if you assume that, Estevao is going to be starting on the right, Palmer in the 10 role, depending on what formation we play. If we play play the 3-4-3, then you may actually, have Palmer on the left, Estevao on the right, or Estevao on the left, Palmer on the right. They are going to start. So I do think Neto will be an interesting one to watch, because there is interest in him from various clubs around Europe. And I do think Chelsea will probably look at it and maybe think, well, hang on a minute, we can maybe cash in here and get someone a bit more suited to what they need. I'd also say that one of Garnacho or Gittins will end up leaving. I'd be quite confident on that. Whether it's on loan with an option or an obligation, or whether it's a permanent move, I don't see both of them sticking around next season.
Yeah, well, I think we've heard for sure that Chelsea have got faith in Gittins. I know there was that report last week that apparently Ben Jacobs said that there was faith in Garnacho. The way I understand it, at least, is that Chelsea would do anything to get rid of Garnacho this summer if they can.
Yeah, and I think it's probably been, we've seen this before, haven't we? The playbook of Chelsea saying they had faith in a player. We had this last year with Petrovic, and they said, we had faith in it, and 5 weeks later he was in a Bournemouth shirt. So,
yeah, I would ignore a lot what comes out by brief journalists at the club, because it's a load of nonsense. They have zero belief in Garnacho, and they would sell him. If someone offered him 40 million right now, they would pack his bags for him and pay for the private plane. I'd
take 14 million for him. Danny, have you got
But yeah,
anything you
Pedro
want to add
Neto,
before
I
we wrap?
absolutely agree with. Mr. Jorge Mendes has already been Mendes. I can't even say it. He's trying to work for a move for him. Tried to say Mendesing, but it didn't really work.
No.
Pedro Neto, yeah, he's been looking at a move for him. I don't know where it'll end up, but he could still stay. But he definitely could move. I think Chelsea, if they get everything they want, there'll be quite a few more incomings. But it all will depend on sales. I think at minimum we'll get Lacroix, Xhaka, and a left 10, whatever. If Enzo goes, we'll get a DM. If Neto and Garnacho go, we might get another attacker. If Delap, Omega, and Jackson go, you could see another striker come, etc. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how the next 6 to 8 weeks go.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Rob, we really, really appreciate your time. I'm sure we'll have you back on through the summer at some point, especially when the transfers heat up again. Guys, if you don't already, which I'm assuming pretty much everybody here will, but please go drop Rob a follow on Twitter. That is where you'll find a lot of his excellent journalism, his comments, and his I'm going to say blunt dealings in the most positive way possible, because Rob shuts people down in an instant, and I very much enjoy watching it. So, Rob, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it. Everyone stay tuned. We'll have more episodes out later. No, not later this week. It'll be early next week now, unless something blows up between now and then. So hopefully next time we see you, England will be in a World Cup quarter-final. So that's it for now, and up the Chelsea.